Rabbi Zalgazunstein began the Farbrengen this afternoon that it is the Shabbos before Yud Beis Tammuz. And the Chazal tell us, Shabbos minei mizborchin kulhu yoimin, that Shabbos gives bracha to the entire week. And though the Rebbe explained, it seems that the Shabbos is an ordinary Shabbos. There's nothing special to the Shabbos. However, the days in the week are very special days. Like, for example, this week we're going to be having Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz. Still, we say that the days of Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz receive their bracha from the Shabbos which comes before. And as it lies in the words of Chazal tell us, Shabbos minei mizborchin kol hu yoimin. In other words, all the days of the week, without any exception, all receive bracha from Shabbos. So we see that the Eibishter has set it up in such a way that the Shabbos, prior to the entire week, gives bracha to all of the inyanim which will take place during the entire week. And the Rebbe compared it to another inyan. We find that a chassan, the Shabbos before his wedding, is called to the Torah. And a wedding is an inyan which we hope and pray that it should be in binyan adayat. It should be something eternal, something which should last adayat. So we say that before one gets married, before one enters to an inyan of adayat, something which is durable and should last for many, many years, what is this preparation to receive an aliyah in the Torah on Shabbos? So it also shows us the same idea, how Shabbos has a shaykhs to all of the most major and important inyanim which will transpire during that week. And though these inyanim are not just inyanim which take place that week and that's it, it's an inyan which takes place that week, takeh, but it's something which has a far effect for many, many years. Still we say that Shabbos gives bracha to that inyan as well. And the same is Benegei Yud Beis Tammuz. In general, the inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz is something which is not merely something personal which has happened to the Frierdiker Rebbe. That the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested, and later he was released from prison on the days of Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz. But as the Frierdiker Rebbe himself writes, Loi oisi bilvad goal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is not something which has happened to him only, that the Eibishter has taken him only out of prison. But as the Rebbe continues, Koil asher b'shem Yisrael yechune. Anyone that can only be identified as a Yid has a shaykhs to this inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz. And as the Rebbe stresses always and did the same today, the Frierdiker Rebbe uses the expression b'shem Yisrael yechune. Yechune in Hebrew means a kinui. In other words, it is something secondary to him. It's not his primary inyan that he's a Yisrael. It is a nickname to him, the fact that he's a Yid. Even to such a Yid, Yud Beis Tammuz is meaningful. And as the Rebbe explained today, this is a letter which was written by the Frierdiker Rebbe, signed by him, and he gave it over to print. So here we see, from this, that the Frierdiker Rebbe himself writes how the inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz is shaykhs to each and every Yid. Even to a Yid which is bekatzvei tevel, meaning he's at the other end of the world. And when we're talking by the other end of the world, it doesn't only mean physically, it means spiritually. A Yid who is so far out that we consider him a Yid of katzvei tevel. Even to such a Yid, there is a message of Yud Beis Tammuz where the Frierdiker Rebbe includes him in the Geula. And the Rebbe says, the Rebbe doesn't write it, but it is self-understood. If we say that he is included in the Geula and the release from prison, that means that all of us were imprisoned while the Frierdiker Rebbe was in prison. And now we say that there is a Geula, the redemption affects all of us as well. Otherwise, what shayach and inyan of Geula if we were not in prison? Geula is shayach is to say when one was in prison, we say Geula. Memela, so this Yontif of Yud Beis Tammuz is something which has a shaykhs to each and every Yid. And now we are standing in the Shabbos, which is the Shabbos before Yud Beis Tammuz. This is the Shabbos that gives bracha to this outstanding day of Yud Beis Tammuz. The Frierdiker Rebbe expressed himself regarding Yutes Kislev. He used an expression that Yutes Kislev is the Chag HaChagim, the Yontif of all the Yomim Tovim, which means that Yutes Kislev adds and gives to all the Yomim Tovim, even the Yomim Tovim, the Sholish Regalim. In other words, even the Yomim Tovim of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, now that we have Yutes Kislev, meaning that we have the whole union of Chassidus, which this is what Yutes Kislev is all about, now we appreciate different, and we have a different look and a different view on all of the Yomim Tovim. This is an expression which the Frierdiker Rebbe used regarding Yutes Kislev, when he spoke about the day that the Alter Rebbe came out of prison. The Frierdiker Rebbe was the Memala Mokim, the one who took the place of the Alter Rebbe generations later. So Memela the Rebbe says, the same expression which the Frierdiker Rebbe used, B'negeya Yutes Kislev, this same expression applies B'negeya Yud Beis Tammuz as well. That we can look at we can and we should look at Yud Beis Tammuz, that it is a day of Chag HaChagim. It's a Yontif of all Yomim Tovim. In other words, it's a Yontif that adds and instills and gives, when we're talking about Torah, Lichtigkeit to all of the Yomim Tovim throughout the entire year. Because Bichlal, every Inyan in Torah has to give a Hirah, has to give a teaching. And if we're talking about Torah Oyer, Torah which is considered a lichtike Torah, the Hirah, the lessons which we derive from Torah, also have to be lichtike lessons. Memela, when we're talking now in this Yud Beis Tammuz, which we're going to celebrate this week, based on what the Alter Rebbe tells us in the Igeres HaKodesh, the Alter Rebbe talks there, B'negei Yomim Tovim, B'negei Rosh Hashanah. The Alter Rebbe there explains that every year, whenever we celebrate a Yontef, an Oyer Chodosh, a new Lichtigkeit, Shaloi Hoya Loi Lamim, which was never revealed yet on this world, comes down on this Yontif, this additional year, this new year. Memela, the Rebbe says, the same applies B'negei to Yud Beis Tammuz, especially based on what the Arizal teaches. There's a teach of the Arizal on the Pasuk in the Megillah. V'hayomim ha'elu niskorim v'nasim. The Arizal. This is in the Megillah, which means these days are remembered and they are fulfilled again, the days of Purim. The Arizal teaches, V'hayomim ha'elu niskorim, when these days are remembered, then it is v'nasim. What does it mean? Every Yontef has a oyer, has a lichtigkeit, something which was revealed when this Yontef originally happened. So the Arizal, and this is a tremendous inyan of Kedusha, tremendous flow of Kedusha when the Yontef was originally originated. The same the Arizal says, that when we celebrate now the Yontef properly, any Yontef, this Oyer HaKedusha, which came into the world when the Yontef was originally set, we have access to it when we celebrate it properly. So this applies to all Yomim Tovim and Mela to Yud Beis Tammuz as well. And it's particularly as we just mentioned, that there is an Oyer Chodosh, Shaloi Hoya Me'ilomim, which the Alter Rebbe uses the expression in Igeres HaKodesh, a Lichtigkeit, a spiritual light which was never revealed in the world yet, coming down with each and every Rosh Hashanah, and it applies to each and every Yontef, and the same to each and every Yud Beis Tammuz. So now we're going to be celebrating such a Yud Beis Tammuz which we never celebrated yet. And again, back to Shabbos, this is the day when we are preparing ourselves for this Yud Beis Tammuz, because this is the Shabbos which gives a bracha to everything which will take place in the entire week, including the days of Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz. Everything is extremely accurate, the Rebbe continues. So not only is it the Shabbos before Yud Beis Tammuz, what is today's date? Let us look at the date. Today's date was Yud Tammuz, 10 days in the month of Tammuz. What is the shaykhus from 10 days in the month of Tammuz to the inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz? Again, the Rebbe says the shaykhus is a very obvious one. We know that the Frierdiker Rebbe has instituted and begged and asked from us that we say Tillim daily, as Tillim is divided according to the month. And this is something which the Frierdiker Rebbe at many, many occasions asked that it be spread, his wish that every day after davening we should recite the Yom Tillim, as Tillim is divided and according to 30 days according to the month. If we were to look in today's Yom Tehillim, which we say 10 days in the month, in any month, but now it is 10 days in the month of Tammuz, what do we recite? Begins with Kapitel Nun Hey. What do we have in Kapitel Nun Hey? We have the famous pasuk of Pada B'Shalom Nafshi, which, by the way, this is when the Alter Rebbe was in prison. And the Alter Rebbe in prison, he kept upon himself to say extra shiurim which he didn't do otherwise. So while he was in prison, he would recite the Yom Tillim also, as Tehillim is divided according to the week. So Yutes Kislev, on that day, when the Alter Rebbe was released from prison, came out on a Tuesday. So the Alter Rebbe was saying the Yom Tehillim of Tuesday. In Tuesday's Yom Tehillim, we also have this Kapitel Nun Hey, which has the words of Pada B'Shalom Nafshi, which means my soul was released in peace. While the Alter Rebbe was saying Tillim, and he was up to these words of Pada B'Shalom Nafshi, that is when he was notified that he's being released from prison. Mela, getting back to the Kapitel of Pada B'Shalom Nafshi, this is a Kapitel which is very meaningful in the thought of one being released from prison, especially as it happened to the Alter Rebbe. And today, which is 10 days in the month of Tammuz, when we say Tehillim, as Tehillim is divided according to the month, this is the Kapitel which we say. In fact, the Rebbe referred to what the Gemara tells us. Pada B'Shalom Nafshi, my soul was released in peace. Mikrovli, he was in a battle. This is who's the one that's saying it originally? It's David HaMelech. Ki berabim hoyu imodi. That's the pasuk in the kapitel. So there's a medrash. The medrash says, what does David mean? That even the Anshe Avshalom, even the people of Avshalom who were not David's friends, they also came to the realization and to the recognition of David HaMelech. Even them too, this is what he's referring to with the word Rabim. Even them too, Hoyu Imodi, are also with me now. So the same thought is here. Even those who originally did not appreciate the work of the Rebbe. However, later, when the Rebbe was released from prison, it was them too that also, in respect and in recognition, came to the realization that they had proper respect and looked up to the great Mesiras Nefesh work which the Frierdiker Rebbe did when he was arrested in Russia, and for this reason he was arrested for his work of Harbatzas Torah v'Yira Shamayim, and later when it came to Yud Beis Tammuz, and he was released. If we were to look a little more into today's date of Yud Tammuz, we find another inyan that happened on Yud Tammuz. And that is, it is brought from the Balei Tosfos, from those who were the authors of the Tosfos, the commentary on Gemara, that when Noach was in the Teva, and he decided to send out a bird to see if the Mabul is over, what date was it? That was on the date of Yud Tammuz, 10 days in the month of Tammuz. The Rebbe says, according to Rashi, it does not come out that way. But the Balei Tosfos do learn this way, that according to Rashi, it's a different date. But according to Tosfos, it came out on 10 days in the month of Tammuz. What shaykhs does this have to us now today, and bechlal to the inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz? The inyan of the Mabul stands for the concept of Golus. Mabul is from the word bul, mixed in. What is Golas? In Golas we're mixed up. We're mixed together, we're mixed up. There's no klarkeit, there's no clearness. Whenever we talk about Golas, we always compare Golas to choshech, to darkness. In other words, a Golas is when there is lichtigkeit, it is not Golas. Golas spiritually corresponds to the concept of darkness. Memela, the inyan of the Mabul, also has a shaykhus to Golas. There's a word from the Baal Shem Tov, Boy ala Teva, famous taich. The Baal Shem Tov taiched, what does Teva mean? When we're talking about the Mabul, it's the box which rescued Noach and his family. However, in Hebrew, Teva has a different meaning. Teva means a word. A word in Hebrew is said Teva. What does the Baal Shem Tov tell us? Boy ala Teva. We have to enter into the words. What does it mean, enter into the words? Into the words of davening and learning. That when a Yid davens and a Yid learns, he has to put himself fully into what he's doing. And the Baal Shem Tov brought out this thought in this pasuk of Boy ala Teva. A Yid has to enter himself, put himself fully into the Teva, into the words of Torah Tefillah. Memele, the Rebbe continues. We are in the midst of Golas. And we are trying to rescue ourselves in Golas by listening to the advice of the Baal Shem Tov, of putting ourselves into the words of Torah and Tefillah. Which this is the Teva. The Teva is what rescued then Noach from the Mabul. And to us now, it is the same Teva, but in a different sense, in the spiritual sense. How the Tevas of Torah and Tefillah, which are rescuing us from the entire environment of Golas, which is out to destroy. However, here we are told that it is not enough for a Yid to lock himself up in the Teva and not want to know what is going on in the outside world. Comes the day of Yud Tammuz, we are reminded that we have to peek out of the Teva. We have to see what is going out in the world around us. What is going out in Golas? See, can we send out the bird as the Mabul over? In other words, look around, how can we help other Yidden who are as yet not in this Teva? The Yidden who are not rescued through the Teva, as we're talking in the spiritual Taich, in the Hasidische Taich, in the Pnimistische Taich, what a Teva means, the words of Torah Tefillah. This is a day of a reminder that of our obligation to look, to stretch out our arm to those who are as yet outside of the Teva and help those Yidden. Though the Rebbe continues, we cannot put an end to the Golas ourselves. This we have to come on to the Yad Hashem. And here the Rebbe quoted the famous words from the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe, when he was released from prison, but not fully. In other words, he was released from a jail, from a prison cell, but they sent him off to Siberia, to the city of Kostroma. At the train station, the Frierdiker Rebbe parted with the Hasidim and friends that came to gesegnen sich with him, to part from him, to bid farewell. And the Frierdiker Rebbe then quoted words which his father, the Rebbe Rashab, said at a certain occasion. And the Rebbe Rashab said, As nicht mit unser Willen sind wir gegangen in Golas. It is not up to us to go to Golas, and therefore, nicht mit unser Willen, it is not dependent on our will. In other words, it is not in our hands, in our own hands, to get us out of Golas. It is the Rabbeinu Shalom who has put us into Golas, and the Rabbeinu Shalom who will take us out of Golas. And again, the Rebbe then continued that even while we are in Golas, the Goyim are only balabatim on our guf, on our body, but not on our neshama, not on our soul. But what we see from all of this is that it is not up to our hands to get us out of Golas. True, but by us demanding from the Rabbeinu Shalom constantly that we want Mashiach now, and we want to go out of Golas, and by the Rabbeinu Shalom seeing this interest, how we are looking out of the Teva, as we just touched, and trying to reach out to those Yidden who are outside the Teva, and help them and bring spiritual lichtigkeit to them. By doing this, this will bring to the Achishena, that Achishena is an expression which is used regarding to the Geula, that the Rabbeinu Shalom will hasten, will rush the Geula, that the Geula will come was gecher and was schneller. And here the Rebbe says, when we're talking about rushing the Geula, there's also various levels in the rush. So let it be in a way that this rush should be rushed. And Memela that Mashiach should come, and as we constantly demanding that we want Mashiach now and take us out of Golas, and put an end to the Golas and take us to Geula. It is also Shabbos Pashas Chukas. The Shayches of Yud Beis Tammuz to Pashas Chukas, the Rebbe says, is something which is very, very obvious and very simple. When we're talking about Chukas, means we're talking about this category of mitzvahs which we cannot understand. As the expression goes, Gzeiro gazarti, Chuka chokakti, ve'ein lecha reshus laharer acher. The Rebbeinu Shalom says it's something which he made the Gezeira. We are not even permitted to give it any second thought why Hashem told us to do it, or what meaning does this have, and so forth. We're doing it solely for one reason, because the Rebbeinu Shalom said we should do so. The Rebbe says the same applies to the whole idea of Yud Beis Tammuz. If one would want to think, why Taka did this happen? That the Frierdiker Rebbe was put into a prison, something which in Seichel there's really no explanation for it. Is this what a Nossi Hadoyer should get from the Rebbeinu Shalom, such type of treatment? There's no way to understand it. The Rebbe expressed himself, is that how one who likes someone treats him? We are being liked by the Rebbeinu Shalom. So, is there any room in our seichel to understand why something like that should have happened? The only way we could understand it is with this concept of chukah. It's a chayk. Rebbeinu Shalom did it. We can't understand it. Chukah chokakti, gzeiro gazarti, ve'ein lecha reshus laharer acher. We have no way to understand why an inyan like this had to happen. It is only the Rebbeinu Shalom did it. We accept it. And again, this message has a shaychus to this week's Sedra. Because this is the name of the Sedra, that's the title of this week's Sedra, and this is what Chazal comment on the Sedra, especially an inyan like that should happen to a Nasi Yisrael. When in this week's Sedra, Rashi stresses, brings out the idea how Hanasi hu hakoil, that a Nasi is equivalent to all of Klal Yisrael. And here a thing like this happened to the Nasi Yisrael. But the only explanation that could be given on it, that this is an inyan of Chukah. Chukah chokakti, Zeiro gazarti, ve'ein lecha reshus laharer acher. We cannot understand it, and we have no way to understand it. As it's customary in the Farbrengens that the Rebbe learns an inyan in the Rashi of this week's Sedre. In today's Farbrengen, the Rebbe also discussed an inyan which had a shayches, which the Rebbe mentioned in the previous two Farbrengens, and has a shayches to Parsha Shlach, which was a question which the Rebbe raised in that Farbrengen. And did not answer it, and first gave an answer today. In Parsha Shlach, the Rebbe raised a question. We find that Moshe sent Meraglim to Eretz Yisrael, which means there was a delegate, there was an emissary of every Shevet, who went to look at Eretz Yisrael, to inspect Eretz Yisrael. Before they left, Moshe told them what exactly they should do. They should look at Eretz Yisrael, look around, bring back a regards, what it looks like, and also bring back from the fruit of Eretz Yisrael. What do we find happened? They brought back the fruit. Who brought back? 10 of them. 10 of the Meraglim. However, Yeshua and Kalev, they did not bring back any of the fruits of Eretz Yisrael. What later happened, as the chain of events, the Meraglim came back with a negative opinion on Eretz Yisrael. Yeshua and Kalev were the only ones that had a positive opinion on Eretz Yisrael. In fact, after the Meraglim, the 10 of the Meraglim, gave their negative opinion, it is then when Yeshua and Kalev began to speak, and as Rashi tells us that the Yidden were so aufgekocht, they were so antagonized then, that they wouldn't have let Yeshua and Kalev say anything good about Eretz Yisrael. So that is why they had to start talking in such a way that the public would think that what the message that they are saying is also something which is corresponding to the same thought which the Meraglim are saying. In other words, they're also going to say something negative to Eretz Yisrael. And this was the only way they were able to get access to the people, that the people should listen to them. But as they already had all of Klal Yisrael listening to them, that is when they brought out the idea that Eretz Yisrael is not like what the Meraglim say. On the contrary, this is the country that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to bring us into, and so forth. However, the Rebbe asks, Al Pi Halacha, when one is given a shlichus, in other words, when one is appointed to act as an emissary and fulfill a certain shlichus, a certain message, he has no right to make any changes, even something which he considers may be to the better. He's supposed to follow the instructions exactly what he was told. Memela, if Yeshua and Kalev, together with all of the Meraglim, were told that they have to bring back from the fruits of Eretz Yisrael, what excuse did Yeshua and Kalev have that they didn't bring back anything? The Rebbe discussed this in the Farbrengen of Parsha Shlach. He also discussed it last week. In fact, last week he said, why aren't we busy looking for a teretz on an answer on this question? And today the Rebbe came back to the same question again. During this week, however, in the publications which discuss the Rebbe's Siches, Da'oras Atmimim, there were various terutzim written by various Talmidim and Yingalite who came up with various ideas why Taka, Yeshua, and Kalev did not participate in bringing back the fruits of Eretz Yisrael. One of the interpretations which one of the people wrote is perhaps that Yeshua and Kalev were considered Anoshim Chshuvim. They were considered very noble people, outstanding people, and therefore perhaps it wasn't befitting for them to schlep back fruit from Eretz Yisrael. Rebbe says we cannot accept such a teretz, especially in the realm of Pshuta Shel Mikra when we're learning Pshat, because if they were given this assignment, it was definitely befitting for them to do it. Moshe Rabbeinu knew that he appointed them, and he was well aware that they were Anoshim Chashuvim. So if so, why didn't they take part in bringing back the fruits of Eretz Yisrael? As the Rebbe explained it today, he explained it with a pasuk in this week's Sedra. Today we read in Kapitel Chof, pasuk Hey. After Miriam passed away, the Yidden had no water. And as Rashi comments, the water wasn't the merit of Miriam. So the Yidden began complaining. So as they are complaining, they express themselves as follows. We're looking into Kapitel Chof, pasuk Hey. V'loma helisunu Mitzrayim. Why did you take us out of Mitzrayim? Lahavi esona lamokem hara hazeh, to bring us to this bad place. Lo mekoim zera, it's not a place where it grows. Ute'ena v'gefen v'rimoin umayim ayin lishtos. There's nothing to drink. So we see that they're listing several fruits which are not around in the Midbar. And why did you bring us to such a place? So the question arises, why dafka are they talking about these fruits and foods and not anything else? The Midbar didn't produce anything. So the Rebbe says when the pshat would be, when the pasuk uses the expression loy mekoim zera, what does the pasuk refer to? Chitim usayrim. The pasuk is referring to wheat. Wheat, which is, this is the basics. This is what we get our bread from, this is something which is needed for the existence of a person. Then they listed several other things which they complain on. Te'enim, gefen, which is grapes, rimon, which is a pomegranate, and there's also no water. Why only these fruits and not any other fruits? So regarding to tmorim, which is dates, we find that at one of the journeys, while the Yidden were traveling, so the pasuk tells us that they found there shivim tmorim. So they had something which was they came across fruits. They had something natural to eat. It seems like these were the fruits which they brought, which when the Meraglim went into Eretz Yisrael, this is what they brought back to show what Eretz Yisrael produces. Now the Meraglim had no need to bring back wheat, because wheat is the same all over. So they didn't bring back any wheats from Eretz Yisrael into the Midbar to show the Yidden, look, this is the wheat that grows in Eretz Yisrael. What did they bring back? They brought back grapes. So we find in Chazal that the grapes that they brought was a very heavy branch. It was a branch that one person couldn't have carried. He needed a group of people to carry it. So if we look into the Gemara, Gemara tells us that 8 people were involved in carrying the grapes. It was such a heavy branch that it needed 8 people to carry. How many Meraglim went altogether? 12. They also brought back from Eretz Yisrael Te'enim, a Te'ena, and they also brought back Rimoin, which is pomegranates. However, to bring back the Te'enim and to bring back the Rimoinim, it was enough that one of the Meraglim carried of each fruit. So one of them was carrying the pomegranates, and another one of them was carrying the Te'enim, which is the figs. It's enough. So for Yeshua and Kalev, there was really nothing left to carry. Especially based on what Eretz Yisrael is. If we look weiter in Pashas Eikev, we will read what is the specialties of Eretz Yisrael. We know it's the Shiva Saminim, which grow in Eretz Yisrael. To go ahead and bring olives, Rabbi says it's not an interesting fruit to go and bring olives. Olives in itself is something which is very bitter, and something which is not that exciting to eat. So we're not going to say that they brought back olives from Eretz Yisrael. Especially the Gemara tells us that one who eats olives leads that one forgets what he has learned. Olive oil has the opposite in itself. Olive oil has a power in itself that it helps for zikaron, it helps for one's memory. However, if one eats just olives, and the olives are not dipped into olive oil, it brings to shikra, it brings to him to forget what he has learned. Remember, they did not bother bringing back olives or olive oil. This was something which he didn't get involved in. Memela, what did they bring back? The rest of the things which Eretz Yisrael was outstanding for. What were the rest of the inyanim? Te'ena, gefen, verimoy. The wheat they didn't bring, and tmarim they had. So this is what they wound up bringing. So this was exactly enough for 10 people. There was no need for the other 2 to schlep anything. So it's not chas v'sholem that Yeshua and Kalev did not listen to what they were told and did not take part to what they were told. Moshe didn't say that every one of them has to schlep fruit. It just worked out so that they, as a group, brought back the fruit which they were supposed to. However, it turned out to be that for Yeshua and Kalev there was no need to schlep any fruit back, to carry any fruit back with them. Now let us go to an inyan in this week's Sedra. In this week's Sedra, we read after Shishi, Kapitel Chof Aleph, Pasuk Yud Aleph. Vayisu ma'oivos, the Yidden were traveling. So they traveled from Oivos, Vayachanu, and they have rested, Bi'iyei ha'avorim. Let us look into Rashi. So Rashi says, Lo yadati, I don't know, Lama nikra shmam, why is it called Iyim? Why does this place have this name? Rabbi says it's a very strange Rashi. And all the commentaries on Rashi get involved with this Rashi, but not on this half of the Rashi, on the other half of the Rashi. The other half of the Rashi is something which deals with diktuk, regarding the yisoid of a word. What is the minimum letters for a yisoid of a word? Normally we know that it's 3 letters. From Rashi here it comes out it could even be 1 letter. And this is what everybody gets involved into. Nobody gets involved to ask questions on the first half of the Rashi. And here the Rebbe says the question is a very obvious one. The Yidden are traveling for many years in the Midbar, and many places have been mentioned in the Torah. Never did Rashi quote any of these places and ask a question, Lo yodati, I don't know why this place is named so-and-so. All of a sudden, we come to this spot of Iyei ha'avorim, Rashi raises a question, Lo yodati, I can't know, Rashi says. Why is this place called Iyei ha'avorim? B'chol HaTorah Kula, even before the Yidden began traveling, way from Chumash Bereshis. The Rebbe says there are many places which are mentioned by name. And Rashi never gets involved to touch up what is the name of the place. At least very rarely that Rashi gets involved in it. Here, Rashi raises a question. I don't know why this place is called Yehava. And the Rebbe says, out of all the commentaries on Rashi that he has seen, he hasn't seen anybody raising this question. And it's a very obvious question. What does Rashi teach? What does Yehava mean? Yehava means this was a very neglected area. It's a Lashon Chulva. It's a disaster area. Yes. A desert. It's a very deserted area. The Rebbe is learning as follows. The Yidden here were traveling in the Midbar. As the Yidden were traveling, there were various areas which were camping areas. So in Pashtus, why are they stopping at some of these areas? Because there are certain kind of supplies which they may be getting at these areas which they do not have access to while they are traveling. Here, the Torah mentions a place which is called Iyei HaAvorim. And as Rashi teaches, Iyei HaAvorim means a very disastrous area. So Rashi says, I cannot understand. Why did the Yidden have to stop here? Being that this is, as its name tells us, an area of disaster, there's nothing that the Yidden could pick up at this spot. So Rashi says, Lo yadati, lama nikra shmam iyim. Why did this place have such a name? Obviously, if the Yidden stopped there was something which they were able to get from this area. And here they're stopping in an area which, according to its name, it sounds that it's a disaster area. So something must be wrong somewhere. So that is what Rashi is commenting on. Lo yadati, I can't understand why is this area called Iyei HaAvorim. Iyei means a disaster area. The Yidden are stopping so that they should be able to have some sort of a benefit from this place. Why are they stopping here? It's customary in the Farbrengens. This is Rashi's question. That's why Rashi is saying, I don't know why this place. In other words, Rashi is bringing to our attention that there's something strange here. The Yidden are stopping here, and in other words, they should be receiving something here. It should be for their benefit, some sort of assets which they do not have while they are traveling. And if that's the case, I can't understand why this place is called Iyei HaAvorim, an area of disaster. As it's customary in the Farbrengens that the Rebbe learns a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos each of the Shabbosim between Pesach and Rosh Hashanah, according to the Yesh Noyagin, those that are the custom of reciting Pirkei Avos Shabbos after Mincha, even after Shavuos, all the summer weeks until Rosh Hashanah. According to this custom, today we recited the 5th Perek. Rebbe says, if we come to the 5th Perek and we want to find the shaychus from the 5th Perek to today, it's very obvious. The 5th Perek begins with Asara Mamoris and discusses many things in the number of 10. Today is 10 days in the month of Tammuz. Now we will probably want to look for a Mishnah that has a shaychus to the inyan of Yud Beis Tammuz. And here the Rebbe says we will find that also. The Mishnah talks, what are the reasons that lead to Golus? Golus and Geulah. Mishnah says, Golus bala oilam. Exile comes to the world for several reasons. Al avodah zarah, serving avodah zarah, al gila aroyos, shvichas damim for murder, val shmitas haaretz, and for not observing properly the laws of Shemitah, which is in Eretz Yisrael every 7 years. We are not allowed to do field work. For a neglect in each of these 4 things which we just mentioned, this brings to Golus. Actually, the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he was put into prison and later sent away into exile, this is also a concept of Golus. So the question arises, there was none of these inyanim in the times of the Frierdiker Rebbe that should have led to his Golus. First of all, Shemitah. Shemitah is something which is applicable only in Eretz Yisrael. In Chutz La'aretz, there's no Indian of Shemitah altogether. And as the Rebbe expressed himself, Roiv Minyan and Roiv Binyan, the majority of Klal Yisrael in those days were not in Eretz Yisrael, were in Golus. Memela, we're not obligated to adhere to the laws of Shemitah. To say that there was an excessive amount of Gila Aroyos or Shvichas Damim, there was no war then. It was quite a few years after the First World War. And as the Rebbe expressed himself while talking about this, he says, in no way can we compare the First World War to the Second World War. Second World War was much worse. But again, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was put into prison, which was in the year of 1927, it was not a year of Milchama. It says, Gila Aroyos, Milchama, all of this was in the Yimei HaBinayim, the medieval days, in those days. Even later, in the days of Napoleon, which is the generation of the Alter Rebbe, there was Gila Aroyos, there was Shvichas Damim. Again, there's no Indian of Avodah Zarah, so it's really not understood. Based on this Mishnah, when the Mishnah gives us reasons that lead to Golus, by the Frierdiker Rebbe, obviously there were none of these reasons. And he was talking to Nasi Hadoyer, and Memela, and Nasi Hadoyer is treated for the Averas which his generation does. However, none of these Averas were popular in those days. Above that, we know that one who kills in B'Shoigeg has to go into Golus. This is the entire concept of Arei Miklot, cities of refuge. For whom were these cities of refuge set up? They were set up for those that may kill someone not intentionally. He would go to Golus. This is not mentioned here. The Mishnah just talks in a general term, Shvichas Damim, shedding blood. But the Mishnah is not referring particularly to one who kills someone b'shegeg. One who kills someone b'shegeg, this is the ideal reason, which in fact the Torah tells us that this is the one who goes to Golus. The Mela, the Rebbe is learning that it is like in a preventive way. In other words, by Frierdiker Rebbe is going to Golus, this in other words, these inyanim don't necessarily have to come before the Golus. These inyanim, if one goes into Golus, it can prevent that it should not come to any of these inyanim, and thereby it will not lead to Golus. So this is how the Rebbe learned. In accordance to this Mishnah, that is why the Frierdiker Rebbe was also in Golus. It was an Indian of exile. However, we do not find that any of these Averas should be popular in those days. But on the contrary, he went into Golus, and by doing that, it helped that it should not come to any of these Averas in his generation, in his days, at the time when he was in Golus. Also customary in the Farbrengens that the Rebbe soll gesund sein discusses an Indian that has a shaykhs to the Shir HaRambam, to the daily Shir of the Rambam. And for those who are learning 3 prakim a day, the Rebbe raised the question today in today's Shir of the Rambam in an Indian which deals with the halachas of Nida, the halachas of Tefillah. Halach in the Rambam, in Perek Dalet of Hilchas Isurei Biyah, halacha ches. Normally we know that a nida has to go to mikveh after 7 days, after 7 clean days. She goes to mikveh in the evening, at night. Here the Rambam tells us, how about if she was sick? Or the mikveh was very far. And women cannot go back and forth at night. They're afraid of robbers. Or they're afraid of the cold. Oy mipnei shenoyalin sharei hamedina balaylo, or because the gates of the city would be locked at night and it would be impossible for them to come back in. Then harezu teveles b'yom hashmini. These are considered cases of exception, and she's allowed to be zech tevel on the 8th day, by day. Oy, the Rambam continues, b'yomim shel achov, later days, and also by yom, by day. This is the halacha. The Rebbe says there's a Ragachover here who raises the following question. Ragachover raises the question, there is a halacha regarding Hilchis Yom Kippur. If Yom Kippur it's Yom Kippur and there is an occasion, for example a bris or a pidyon haben, where there's wine used, the halacha is that the wine should not be given to a child to drink. The child is allowed to drink, he's not fasting. Because when the child will grow older, he will remember that there was some sort of a simcha on Yom Kippur, and he was given to drink. He will not differentiate that he was a child and now he's over bar mitzvah. So it may lead to a michshol, to a stumbling block. Therefore, the Chachamim said rather don't drink wine and just fulfill it, go through the same procedure without anyone drinking the wine. So the Ragachover wants to compare that halacha to this halacha here. Just like over there we are afraid the child should drink the wine. Why? Because next year it may lead to him being under a false impression and thinking that he's allowed to drink wine at a bris or at a pidyon haben. So the same the Rebbe is asking, how the Ragachover is asking, here it may be the same. The woman will not realize that here it was an exception because the gates to the city lock, or because of fear of listim, fear of thieves, fear of being held up, or similar fears. And being that we're giving her a heta to go to mikveh during the day, which this is an exceptional case, it may lead that even when these conditions are not prevailing, that she may want to do the same, because she already knows that there is an exception of one being table by day. This is the question which the Ragachover asks. The answer which the Ragachover answers, he answers there is a difference between tevilah and in the mitzvah over there of drinking wine when a mitzvah is performed, where we normally recite a Be'er Pri HaGofen. The way he explains it, the way I understood, if I understood correctly, there it is a kum va'aseh. What we're doing is, we're going to do something, we're doing a pa'ula, we're doing something. So we are saying, this act can mislead us somehow also, if we do this thing. So that is why the halacha is, we're better off not doing this thing. Here by Tvila, not the pshat, we are going out to do something special. Halachas of Tvila, first of all, there's something which we are always supposed to rush Tvila. In other words, when a woman can become tahir, there's no inyan in dragging it out and staying tamei without any reason. In other words, there's an inyan she has to become tahir as soon as possible. There's another halacha. Halacha is if she becomes tahir unintentional. In other words, theoretically speaking, if she falls into a mikveh, she is tahir. It's not the pshat we have to go and do a pa'ula to become tahir. In any way whatsoever, if the water comes on her, the mikveh water comes up on her, she becomes tahir. The way the Ragachover says, basically the nakuda, what the Ragachover is saying is, here we are doing a special act. We can do away with this act. Here, it's not the pshat we are doing a special act to say we should do away with it. she'll be well aware any way she can become tahir, she will definitely try to become tahir. And therefore we're not going out and doing anything special with the tefillah b'yoyim. There we are doing something special, we're giving the child to drink wine. So Mamela, by the piyula of drinking the wine, it can lead that next year Yom Kippur he wouldn't remember that he drank the wine when he was a child. And therefore, he may go ahead and drink wine again at a Pidyon HaBen or at a Bris, and say that at a Simcha, at the Pidyon HaBen it is different. However, here it cannot come to such type of a, to lead to such type of a mishal, to such type of a misleading. She will definitely realize that it is only these emergency reason that she was allowed to do it, and not for any other reason. It is a hard and complicated inyan. The Rebbe did not explain it at length. If I understand correctly, this is basically the difference. While talking about the inyan of Limud HaRambam, the Rebbe again alerted us and begged very strongly to see to it that we learn the Shiurim and Rambam. The Rebbe again asked that those places who did not where there were no celebrations yet for the siyum of the Rambam, for the completion of the Rambam, celebrations of such should be made. And as the Rebbe says, the whole idea of these celebrations is simply that this will involve more and more Yidden to take part in the Shiurim of the Rambam. And because as the Rebbe explains, this is the entire idea of a siyum altogether. Whenever we celebrate a conclusion of a Masechta or the siyum of Torah, the whole idea of a siyum is that it should lead and extend to the new beginning. And that is what we say even on Simchas Torah. When we conclude Chamisha Chumshe Torah, we right away begin Bereishis. And in the Rishus, which is said when we call up the person to Chassan Bereishis, we say, Maskifin Siyuma Lahaschola. What we are trying to do is we tie together, we bring close the end of the Torah. When we complete it, we just do not complete it and walk away. As soon as we complete, we begin something new. We begin the Torah anew. The Mele the Rebbe says when we are making these celebrations for the siyum of the Rambam, the goal of the celebrations is that it should lead to more people taking part in the Shiurim of Rambam. The Rebbe concluded the Farbrengen that we should prepare ourselves properly for Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz and the remainder days, and see to it to take part in Farbrengens for Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz. And as he said, that what Rabbeinu Shalom here, our screaming of we want Mashiach now, as we take a scream it in English, he says, which is not a Lashon HaKodesh. And the Rabbeinu Shalom will adhere to our request, and definitely to those requests which are not in English, and those that are in the original texts of davenings and tefillos, where we constantly keep on begging that the Rabbeinu Shalom should send us Mashiach now and take us out of Golus.